Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Medical Devices in the Age of AI and Cybersecurity, Regulatory Insights. And as always, I'll just give a quick orientation on the webinar platform before I introduce our speakers for today. The webinar slides are available to the left side of your screen, along with a few more helpful links if you would like to explore and learn more about compliance and risks and how we can help simplify and accelerate your compliance processes. We want this webinar to be as engaging as possible, so please do send us any questions you may have, and we'll aim to address them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you would like to submit a question for this Q&A session, use the Ask a Question widget on the left side of your screen. And for any questions that we don't get to during today's live session, we'll make sure to follow up with you directly to give you an answer. And at any time outside of this Ask a Question feature, if you're interested in having a member of our team follow up with you, please don't hesitate to use the Start a Conversation button at the bottom of your screen. And last but not least, the webinar recording will be sent to you within 24 hours. My name is Orla Morris, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Compliance and Risks. And I'm delighted to be joined by our wonderful panel today, Fernanda Parro, Patricia Weathers, and Kai-Ann Seo. So starting with Fernanda, she is a Senior Regulatory Compliance Specialist with the Global Regulatory Compliance Team based in Barcelona. Fernanda monitors regulatory updates across North, Central and South America with deep expertise in medical device legislation. As the project lead for a global initiative spanning multiple jurisdictions, Fernanda regularly delivers in-depth analysis on complex legal and compliance queries related to medical devices. She holds a European Healthcare Compliance Certificate Programme, a postgraduate degree in constitutional law, and a master's in international trade law, specializing in MedTech compliance with a regulatory focus on cybersecurity and data protection. A qualified lawyer in both Brazil and Portugal, Fernanda is fluent in Portuguese, English and Spanish, currently learning French and proficient in Italian. Thank you so much for joining us today, Fernanda. And just moving on now to Patricia. Patricia joined Compliance and Risks as a regulatory compliance specialist in 2024. She's a certified lead auditor for ISO 13485 and ISO 9001 and has spent over 10 years working in quality compliance assurance in the medical device and automotive manufacturing sectors. Additionally, her background includes research and information services at the academic level and in training development. Thank you so much for joining us today, Patricia.
Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
And last but not least, I'd like to be joined by Kai-Ann, who is a regulatory compliance analyst here at Compliance and Risks, having joined the company in 2024. She has an academic background in neuroscience and criminology, and prior to joining Compliance and Risks, worked in the raw material regulatory field, focusing on chemical compliance with regulations such as RoHS, REACH, TSCA, and toxicology standards, including MSDS. Kai-Ann currently monitors regulatory updates in South Korea, Greece, and US states, and serves as a secondary subject matter expert for medical devices. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Orla. I'm delighted to be here.
So before we officially kick off the webinar, I would like to provide a bit of background about compliance and risks for those who are joining the series for the first time. At Compliance and Risks, our mission is to help ensure global companies have the tools and information to build safe, sustainable products in a world full of change. We are the trusted product compliance technology provider for the world's leading brands and have spent 2 decades honing the digital tools, expertise, and content you need to stay ahead of the dynamic regulatory landscape, proving your product's compliance, protecting your brands, and importantly, helping to drive your growth. At Compliance and Risks, we have the world's most comprehensive regulatory database with over 100,000 regulations historically available in C2P. With a global regulatory coverage and expertise across over 10 industries, we understand that regulatory compliance definitely doesn't sleep. And our regulatory expert team is truly global, with 28 languages collectively spoken across the team, all fortified by our 30 knowledge partners. And as mentioned, C2P is our enterprise software designed to keep global organizations on top of regulatory changes and their impact worldwide. This includes key features such as early warning alerts, impact probability, productivity workflow tools, and so much more. And with that, I'm delighted to hand it over to you, Fernanda. I think you might be on mute, Fernanda.
Now, yes. Okay, thank you, Orla. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I hope you enjoy this content with us. So I will start with the digital transformation of healthcare, regulatory convergence, and why compliance is now a strategic enabler for MedTech innovation. Okay. So now I bring here some content about integration of digital technologies, data, software connectivity, and automation. So here, when we talk about the digital transformation of healthcare and MedTech, the integration of data, software, and connectivity and automation is at the center of it. So data is now the most critical resource in healthcare, from real-world evidence to device-generated data, enabling continuous monitoring, predictive insights, and more personalized care. Software turns the data into clinical and operational intelligence. So with the rise of software as a medical device, AI algorithms, and digital therapeutics, software has become a core part of the product itself, not just a supporting tool. Connectivity ensures that devices, systems, and stakeholders exchange information securely in real time. So this is what enables remote diagnostics, connected care pathways, and interoperability across borders, so which is the key for regulatory convergence. And finally, automation helps reduce manual processes. So it improves traceability, strengthens data integrity, support compliance by design, and also automated quality systems, automated reporting, and automated risk controls are becoming essential for scaling innovative without increasing regulatory burden. So these four elements don't just modernize healthcare, they make compliance a strategic enabler. So integrated digital technologies allow MedTech companies to innovate faster, demonstrate safety and performance more effectively, and also adapt to regulatory expectation with far greater agility. So I brought here a few examples that combine these features and products to demonstrate the possibilities. So we have here these key drivers, so like software-based and AI-enabled devices, software as medical devices, the know as SAMD, machine learning, cloud computing and data analytics, devices increasingly communicate with each other and with clinical information systems. So all of them are key drivers nowadays for these specific points that I mentioned. And examples like this, so wearables that are growing very, very fast, AI-based radiology diagnostic tools, smart infusion pumps with remote alerting, cloud-connected surgical robots that are being very explored, 3D machines, for example, are examples very important nowadays. And what we have to bear in mind and the impact of it. So devices become more intelligent, adaptive, and data-driven. So also more complex to regulate. So this is the big problem that we are facing, currently facing. And what we understand, what means regulatory convergence. So it align requirements, standards, processes across countries. And with that, manufacturers can bring safe, effective devices to multiple markets more efficiently. So it is the process in which different countries or regions gradually align their medical devices regulations, standards, and practices. It does not necessarily mean adopting identical laws or regulations, guidelines, and so on, but it means moving toward similar principles, comparable requirements, and harmonized approach. And the goal here is to make regulatory systems more compatible, predictable, and efficient. And why convergence is needed? I brought here three main reasons. So faster access to safe medical devices. So when regulators use similar standards, for example, risk classification, clinical evidence requirements, so companies can prepare documentation that works in multiple markets, and it reduces delays in bringing devices to patients. Reduce burden for manufacturers, what it means. So instead of redoing tests or documentations for each regulator, companies can rely on shared terminology, common safety and performance standards, and comparable technical documentation formats. Improved patient safety and quality. Convergence encourages internally recognized standards. So for example, ISO 13485, 14971, and IEC standards as well. Good regulatory practices like the GRPs and release models. So using another trusted regulator's work to inform decisions, for example. So all of these raise the overall level of safety and quality worldwide. And here I put as well key elements that encourages all of the convergence. And we can see here, as I mentioned, the ISO, the reliance and recognition mechanism, so post-market alignment, including vigilance, report formats, and adverse event terminology that is also growing very fast nowadays, and it's very important. So yeah, that's it for this first topic. And I will pass to my colleague, Cayenne, to talk about AI in medical devices. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernanda. Okay, so building on our initial overview of the MedTech landscape, we're now ready to begin the deep dive we promised. So section 2 moves us into the core of the presentation, the legal and regulatory foundations for AI in medical devices. So first, the critical distinction, SAMD versus SIMD. This is the first question any regulator will ask. On the left, software as a medical device, or SAMD. This is the software that is the medical device. It performs a medical purpose on its own, independent of any specific piece of hardware. Think of an AI algorithm in the cloud that analyzes MRI scans, or an app on a smartphone that diagnoses a condition from a photo. It's regulated as a standalone medical device. And on the right, we have software in a medical device, or SIMD, and this is the software that is integral to a physical device. It's the embedded firmware or operating system that makes the hardware function. Think of the software running an insulin pump or a ventilator. In this case, the software is regulated as part of that hardware system. This distinction is the first and most important step in determining your regulatory path. This webinar will be focusing on SAMD more because it represents the autonomous, adaptive AI systems that are driving the creation of new, independent laws, such as the EU AI Act. So now let's look at the risk. Both the EU and international bodies are taking a risk-based approach. Under the new EU AI Act, the classification is like a pyramid. While it has categories for minimal, limited, and even unacceptable risk, the reality for us is that nearly all AI-driven medical devices will be automatically classified as high risk. This classification is the trigger. It automatically subjects you to the strictest requirements, which is a robust quality management system, extensive technical documentation, human oversight, and full transparency. This aligns with the model from the IMDRF, the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. Their framework classifies SAMD into 4 risk categories based on 2 key questions. First, what is the significance of the information the AI provides? Is it just to inform a doctor, or is it driving a clinical decision or making a diagnosis? Second, what is the state of the patient's condition? Is it non-serious, serious, or critical? As you can see, in AI that diagnoses a critical condition will, of course, be in the highest risk category, demanding the most stringent controls. The primary overlap is that most AI-powered software as a medical device that fall under the high-risk IMDRF categories will also be classified as high risk under the EU AI Act. However, the classification systems are distinct, and the EU AI Act imposes additional requirements on top of existing medical device regulations. Now for the United States, the FDA does not have a separate risk classification system specifically for AI. Instead, AI-driven devices are classified using the existing device framework, such as class 1, 2, or 3, just like any other medical devices based on their potential for harm. The key is the device's intended use, which determines the classification and regulatory pathway. Now, this brings us to a crucial comparison for any global manufacturer. How do the US and EU approaches differ, especially for AI that learns and adapts over time? The FDA in the US is taking what it calls a total product life cycle, or TPLC approach, which is grounded in executive orders on AI. It's an adaptive, risk-based framework, and their key tools or guidance documents primarily the good machine learning practices. The core mechanism they propose for adaptive AI is a predetermined change control plan, or PCCP. This is essentially a plan you submit to the FDA before you market your device, outlining how your AI will learn and change, and what changes you can make without needing a new submission, and how you will validate those changes. The EU, on the other hand, is creating a dual compliance framework. This is vital to understand, as your AI medical device must comply with 2 complete sets of laws. First, it must meet all the requirements of the Medical Device Regulation, or MDR, which covers safety, performance, and clinical evidence. Second, it must also comply with all the new requirements of the AI Act, which is binding legislation. This covers data governance, technical documentation, transparency, and human oversight. You will need to build a harmonized quality system that passes conformity assessment for both. Now, beyond the US and EU, the landscape in Asia is also evolving rapidly, but it's not monolithic. We see 2 distinct approaches emerging. On one side, we have prescriptive frameworks. For example, South Korea is a leader here with its new Digital Medical Products Act and other legislations, which creates a binding legal framework for AI governance, data quality, and even defenses against specific AI attacks like data poisoning. Similarly, China's NMPA has issued detailed guidance that mandates traceability and prohibits adaptive self-learning AI without a separate reapproval. On the other side, we see a focus on harmonization. Japan is intentionally favoring a flexible approach, choosing to align with international principles like GMLP, rather than creating new specific national laws for MedTech AI. Taiwan is similar, regulating AI under its existing Medical Devices Act, and formally recommending manufacturers follow international standards, specifically the FDA's GMLP. So that was a high-level look at AI. Now let's pivot to our second major topic, cybersecurity. The new mindset here and the new legal reality is cybersecurity by design. Cybersecurity by design is a proactive approach to building secure products and systems by integrating security measures from the earliest stages of development, rather than treating it as an add-on. So this global lifecycle approach is the general expectation for regulatory submissions in both the US and EU. We begin at the design stage, where the US requires a secure product development framework and AI threat modeling. And the EU emphasizes embedding security based on the ISO standard here, and conducting formal threat modeling using methods like STRIDE to identify threats before you've written a single line of code. Security requirements must be part of your initial product specs. Now, moving on to the development phase, both require secure coding and an SBOM, which the EU Resilience Act legally mandates. Verification includes comprehensive penetration testing. For the verification phase, the requirement is to go beyond simple functional tests. This includes conducting comprehensive penetration testing and formally assessing the risk of all software of unknown provenance components within the medical device. This is expected in both the US and EU. And finally, deployment and monitoring is continuous. The US uses the Predetermined Change Control Plan, so-called PCCP, for proactive, pre-authorized post-market changes, while the EU enforces mandatory 24-hour incident reporting under the NIS2 and a minimum of 5 years of security support under CRA. This lifecycle approach isn't just best practice, it's now codified in law. This slide breaks down the key legal pillars for cybersecurity. In the US, the FD&C Act, specifically Section 524B, is the new legal engine. This, along with the Patch Act, legally mandates that manufacturers have a plan to monitor and address post-market vulnerabilities. The FDA's pre-market cybersecurity guidance is the how-to guide for fulfilling these legal requirements. In the EU, it's a multi-layered system. It starts with the MDR's General Safety and Performance Requirements, or GSPR1, which establishes the high-level need for security. Then the Cyber Resilience Act adds specific hard requirements like SBOMs and 5-year support. And finally, the NIS2 Directive governs the incident reporting piece, forcing the 24-hour notification. And you have to comply with all three. Let's have a deeper dive in EU's lifecycle approach, which is being enforced by two major new pieces of EU legislation. First, the NIS2 Directive. This expands the scope of the original NIS Directive to include medical device manufacturers as important entities. It mandates robust supply chain risk management and vulnerability handling. But its most headline-grabbing feature is the reporting timeline. You must provide an initial notification of a significant security incident to your authorities within 24 hours of becoming aware of it. And this requires a very mature incident response plan. And then the second, and perhaps even more impactful maybe, is the Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA. This is a horizontal law that applies to all products with digital elements sold in the EU. It legally enforces security by design, and its key mandates are first, that you must provide a software bill of materials, or SBOM, to your users so that they can manage their own vulnerability risk. And second, it mandates that you provide security updates and support for the expected lifespan of the product with a default minimum of 5 years. So let's put that all together. What does this mean for your post-market surveillance? It means vulnerability and incident management is a core, continuous, and legal mandated obligation. It is not a one-time check at lunch. Vulnerability management means you must be proactively scanning for new threats, identifying them in your product, and having a process to remediate them. This includes patching and formal risk scoring using standards like CVSS. And incident reporting means you must have a clear, documented, and tested procedure for rapid reporting, both to the authorities under NIS2 and to your users and customers. The key takeaway is this: security risk management is a total product lifecycle activity. It does not end when the product ships. Finally, a quick look at the cybersecurity in Asia shows a similar mosaic. While there isn't a single CRA for the entire continent, the principles are converging. First, the lifecycle and risk focus is universal. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan are all anchoring their requirements in international standards, specifically this IEC standards mentioned here for software. And second, secure documentation is a major thing. Just like in the US and EU, SBOMs are becoming a key requirement mandated in places like Singapore and Japan. China's NMPA also requires extremely detailed cybersecurity documentation for registration. And finally, we see unique national frameworks emerging. So Singapore is a great example with its tiered cybersecurity labeling scheme to provide market transparency. And South Korea, as mentioned, is implementing its own binding Digital Medical Products Act, which fully integrates cyber controls. So to quickly summarize our core findings, first, the regulatory landscape is fundamentally risk averse. In the EU, virtually all AI-driven medical technology is classified as high risk under the EU AI Act, which triggers the most stringent compliance burdens. And second, for the EU, you face dual compliance. Your AI medical device must adhere to both the existing MDR or IVDR for safety and performance, the new requirements of the AI Act for governance and transparency. And third, security is now law. The new mindset is cybersecurity by design, legally mandated by legislation like the CRA and NIS2. It's no longer a post-market patch, but it's a foundational pre-market requirement. And then finally, the common theme uniting all of this is the total product lifecycle. Both AI governance and cybersecurity are continuous, legally mandated obligations that do not end when your product ships. That was all I had for these two. And now I'd like to hand it over back to Fernanda, who will be covering data protection and governance.
Thanks, Hayen. So having covered cybersecurity in medical devices, let's turn to data protection. Cybersecurity secures the systems, but data protection ensures sensitive health data is handled lawfully, minimized, and accountable under GDPR. So now I'll walk you through the key principles of data protection and governance. GDPR principles, mainly talking about lawfulness, minimization, and accountability. And lawfulness means that you can only process personal data when you have a valid legal basis. Minimization, only the minimum amount of data necessary for the intended purpose can be collected. And accountability, organizations must prove compliance, not just declare it. And this includes data protection impact assessments, so DPIAs, records of processing activities, ROPA, technical and organizations measures, security, encryption, access controls, training and governance structure, regular audits and vendor oversight. And in the medical devices sector, accountability often overlaps with KMS requirements, clinical evaluation plans, and post-market surveillance systems. This is a cornerstone of the digital health compliance, and we should understand the GDPR as the foundation. So it complements the other frameworks such as the European Health Data Space, AI Act, and others, Cybersecurity Act, and other regulations. So manufacturers, healthcare providers, and digital health innovators must ensure that the collection, processing, and sharing of health data are lawful, ethical, and secure. The GDPR also governs all process of personal data, and this includes health and genetic data, and they are classified as a special categories of data. And GDPR also requires that the organization should demonstrate compliance and not only claim it, as I mentioned. And also, I put here that under Article 5.1c, only data are adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary for the intended purpose may be collected. And I also told you what it involves. Okay, so handling sensitive health data. Connected devices, software as medical devices, and digital health platforms often collect or process special category data. So health, biometric, genetic, and etc. And for manufacturers, this means data protection by design and default. So manufacturers must integrate privacy principles into the product lifecycle from the earliest design stage. For example, minimization of data, purpose limitation, access control and role-based permissions, strong encryption, audit trails and monitoring, secure development lifecycle, clear data governance model, and what manufacturers must define in this case. So they need the controls, who controls the data? So controller versus processor roles. How data flows inside and outside the device system. How long this data is retained. Security controls throughout the life cycle. For example, including post-market, of course. Transparency and user rights. So for patient-facing devices and platforms, what manufacturers must enable in this case? Clear privacy notes, access, rectification, deletion, and portability, where applicable, of course. Consent management were legally required, and this becomes particularly important for AI-enabled devices, where explainability and model audit documentation are increasingly expected. And medical devices that transmit or store this health information must demonstrate secure processing throughout the whole data life cycle, as I mentioned, because this is the most important thing nowadays. It's not just only one part of the life cycle. No, we have to take care of the whole life cycle, the whole product, and everything that is regarding the product and its life cycle. The vendor compliance. So vendor means any external company or service provider that processes data or provides service on your behalf. So more specifically, under the GDPR, vendor is a data processor. So a vendor is usually a data processor, a third-party organization that handles personal data only according to your instructions. So regulators expect full supply chain control. And they need to be responsible even when using vendors. So this is what the manufacturers should bear in mind. And this includes cloud providers, data analytic tools, clinical trials platforms, and others. And they must ensure data processing agreements, verify the sub-processors that are disclosed and compliant, conduct vendor security assessment, follow the GDPR and cybersecurity best practices, ensure the vendor supports patient rights and all regulation, and for high-risk processing, DPIA is mandatory. And I will mention here more clearly about, for example, the due diligence. So the manufacturers must assess every critical supplier and what it means. Information security certifications, for example, ISO 27001, data protection practices. As I mentioned, the DPA is mandatory when we are talking about high risky processing, regulatory compliance like MDR, IVDR, sustainability of the vendor, business continuity, and risks. The other thing is processor agreements and sub-processors. So, for example, in this case, manufacturers must establish the GDPR compliance, as I also mentioned, clear restrictions and super processors as well, documented responsibilities, incident reporting, audits, encryption, logs, and so on. And regarding ongoing vendor monitoring, under MDR and IVDR again, the manufacturers remain legally responsible for change control and version management, quality management system oversight, and again, I should mention here the ISO 13485, validation of updates, cybersecurity post-market surveillance, and SLAIs and regular audits. So in summary here, manufacturers cannot rely solely on the vendor is compliant. So the regulators see if manufacturers as the accountable part as well. Now, regarding cross-border data and transfer and alignment with EHDS. So the European Health Data Space introduces a unified framework for primary and secondary use of electronic health data within the EU. And manufacturers must anticipate. Under GDPR, personal data can only be transferred outside the EU, EEA, in certain circumstances. And it includes the destination country has an adequacy decision. So, for example, Japan, UK, South Korea, and parties use appropriate safeguards. And nowadays, the digital health ecosystem often rely on cloud platforms. So AI analytics, international vendors, and others, and raise challenge under the GDPR, especially Chapter 5. And under the GDPR, personal data, as I mentioned, can only be transferred outside the EU and in certain circumstances that I mentioned. So for medical devices with global cloud infrastructure, cross-border data flow must be transparent, documented, assessed for risks, aligned with SCREAM's 2 requirements, and example, additional technical safeguards. And I added here a pretty new document that the EU launched on October, just as a curiosity, because there are some important information there. So the EU fact sheet about EU cross-border healthcare. And to finalize, I will talk about data governance in healthcare and MedTech. So I bring here some specific conducts that companies must ensure regarding this time that we are living. So organizations must establish robust data governance frameworks, defining who can access which data, so under what circumstance and for what purpose. Use these interoperability standards that I mentioned, that it should include built-in security and consent management functions, and any secondary use, it doesn't matter for what, so AI training, clinical research, or post-market analysis. It must ensure pseudonymization, ethical oversight, and purpose limitation. And of course, it involves following the GDPR principles and other regulations like the cybersecurity and MDR, IVDR, any other that can implies in data and sensitive data and so on. So they need to ensure security and proper handling of sensitive data, managing cross-border data transfers correctly, and preparing for EHDS requirements. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Patricia to talk about the compliance strategies.
Thanks, Fernanda. What I'm going to do in the next few slides is I'll take a quick look at 3 compliance strategies to be found in regional governing relations relating to medical devices and artificial intelligence, or AI. The first of the 3 strategies is integrating AI governance and data protection, which includes cybersecurity, traceability, and data management, again, through a device's entire life cycle. Second, we have cross-functional compliance frameworks, which again is part of taking a risk-based approach like we've seen in the regulations spoken about earlier, as well as ISO 13485 by multidisciplinary teams within an organization to plan, create, and evaluate the AI functions relating to medical device function and potential effects on patients. The third item is continuous monitoring and proactive compliance, which we've heard both from Fernanda and Cayenne, and that's focused on monitoring the AI's performance as well as its updates. And of course, as mentioned previously, post-market vulnerability management. And I'll basically just be looking at different regs from Europe, South America, and the United States. Starting with the European Union, specifically 3 regulations, the EU MDR's Annex 1, GSPR Section 17, the actual EU AI Act, and the GDPR. Under the first compliance strategy, integrating AI governance, cybersecurity, and data protection, we see that in the GSPR Section 17, our concern is placed at the design phase. ensuring that developers are ensuring means for security or securing information, and preventing unauthorized access to patient data. This is echoed in the EU AI Act, Article 10, which mandates that requirements to prevent algorithmic bias in AI systems. As a reminder, in the EU AI Act, medical devices fall within the high risk classification, as we've heard earlier, just emphasizing that and how stringent that can be. It means manufacturers really have to meet these stringent obligations for data governance and including human in the loop or human oversight to ensure patient safety. In the GDPR, an AI medical device that processes patient data must comply with lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. And that means they have to implement privacy by design and default. So defaulting has to be that main factor there. In order, and this is how they would manage how data is collected, how it's stored, and used for AI model training, as well as monitoring the systems itself. Looking at Europe's cross-functional compliance, we're looking at the GDPR and the EU AI Act speaking to establishing a quality management system or QMS or risk management system, RMS, that have multidisciplinary teams. And these multidisciplinary teams are involved in planning, creating, monitoring, and evaluating the AI's functions of the medical device itself. And those of you who are familiar with ISO 13485 or other regulations really should also already have that concept of multidisciplinary teams in effect. Looking at this third strategy for Europe, continuous monitoring and proactive compliance. Both documents we see here call out post-market surveillance. And that means to identify system drift, initiating corrective actions. Those of you who have capital programs in place, this is again where you'll find that that's where this is applicable if you're complying with this regulation, and keeping accuracy and cybersecurity as key priorities. Obviously, we do that already with medical device, but again, when incorporating an AI, that becomes even more key. Now let's move east around the globe to South America. With medical devices and AI regulations in South America, most countries are developing the AI legislation at this current time, and they're basing it on the EU AI Act with an eye towards harmonization. For today, it focused on regulations from Brazil and Peru. However, most of the countries in South America are aligning legislation with international regulatory frameworks. Please note that AI or machine learning enabled medical devices are regulated under National Software as Medical Device or SAMD regulations in both Brazil and Argentina. We start again with this compliance strategy of integration. And Brazil's RDC number 751 is the country's foundational medical device regulation, and that includes SAMD. And it also outlines the manufacturer responsibilities for efficacy of the AI algorithms, especially when they're applied to patients. Stepping outside of the medical arena, you've got the LGPD Article 20, and that is on automated decision-making, and it means that individuals must be informed if their data is processed by AI to include health decisions. In Peru's AI law, again, the language we see centers around a risk-based approach and inclusion of human in the loop. Looking at cross-functional compliance, both Brazil and Peru regulations emphasize a cross-functional compliance for both as multidisciplinary teams that will document the AI system's risk as well as its post-market compliance. And for continuous monitoring in the South American countries, we can see that as it is in the EU, issue detection and drift recognition fall. Notice the wording of technovigilance, indicating a higher level of monitoring needed for such high-risk AI models. And again, noting Peru's Decree 115 also refers to the AI lifecycle. And we saw this earlier with Cayenne presenting or talking about the total product life cycle. The third region that we take a look at is the U.S. It centers its medical device and AI regulatory framework out of the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. And we see here that for integrating cybersecurity and protecting data regulations, the cybersecurity and medical devices final document includes supply chain risk management that we just heard Fernanda referring to. As part of AI lifecycle management, the draft of AI-enabled device software functions regulation states transparency is required, again, to keep users informed. The marketing submission recommendations for a predetermined change control plan, or PCCP, is how the AI system or model changes should be planned for. And as we look at the U.S. for cross-functional compliance, we see that collaboration from design through post-market phases is required, with specific attention to be paid to bias identification and data management that would necessitate involvement from data science, engineering, and clinical teams. So again, those of you who have factored in cross-functional teams as part of your control plans or your FEMA plans or something along those lines, or FMEAs, I should say, you're again used to these cross-functional teams. And it's just, you've got to include more of the individuals around the AI development and engineering. Returning to the cybersecurity and medical devices, this regulation states that there must be integration of security during the design controls process. And of course, it must be documented. The third strategy applied to the US, it can be achieved by proactive planning for detecting system vulnerabilities and how systems should be updated or shall be updated as needed. Also, within the marketing submission recommendations for a PCCP final document, the overarching intent of it is a proactive compliance without the complication of adding pre-market submissions of models or systems, so that, you know, it's not really a one and done. However, you've already factored it in, so if you have to make changes or updates, you may not have to submit another pre-market application. To close out my section, I've got a list of relevant laws and regulations you may wish to review. On this slide are laws and regulations from these three regions which affect medical devices and their artificial intelligence applications. And now I'm going to hand you back to Fernanda, and she'll continue.
Thanks, Patty. So now I will briefly touch on this topic now about future trends and regulatory outlook. And here I will talk about AI Act enforcement timeline and ethical AI requirements, rising cybersecurity oversight and audits, and the last topic will be the future role of data protection and transparency in innovation. Going through the first one, AI Act enforcement timeline, it's important to bring here some key milestones that involve the AI Act. So for 2025, the AI Act formally enters into force because it was adopted in 2024. And it is the world's first comprehensive law regulating artificial intelligence. And it introduces a regulatory framework in addition to MDR and IVDR. We always should bear in our minds that we are currently facing an interesting landscape because we don't have any regulation that it's very comprehensive. So we always have to check other regulations. So in this case, AI, it's not the only one regarding medical devices in this topic. So we also have to check the MDR and IVDR and take them as a base. So it happens as well with the cybersecurity regulations and others. So just to highlight this part that I think it's very important. And its implementation will roll out in stages. So as I started to mention, in 2025, it formally entered in force. So we have now provisions on prohibited AI practice taking effect within 6 months. 2026, we will have obligations for high-risk AI system, including those used in medical devices and healthcare applications. They will become mandatory. And we will expect for 2027 that AI systems must comply with conformity assessment, documentation, transparency, and post-market monitoring requirements. So we really rely that in 2027, we will have the whole pack done. And regarding the growing focus on ethical AI and transparency, it's important to say that the regulatory focus is shifting beyond technical safety toward ethical governance of AI in healthcare. So we don't have all this technical support nowadays, but I think one of the first things that we have respect now is the ethical governance of AI. So what are the impact on manufacturers? For example, AI transparency and data governance became mandatory, so not nice to have. And extensive technical documentation is required for algorithms, training data, performance drift, and cybersecurity. Manufacturers must demonstrate that continuous AI monitoring and corrective mechanisms. And also to explain a little bit more about this ethical AI and transparency, we should understand that explainability and human oversight, for example, AI systems, they must be very transparent and allow users and regulators to understand their functioning and limitations. Another example, I should say, is bias mitigation and representativeness, for example. So developers must ensure data sets reflect real-world diversity to prevent any discriminatory outcomes in diagnostics or treatment, or even in clinical trials. They should ensure that they don't use any bias in this case. And ethical design and accountability. So manufacturers will need to demonstrate that AI models support human-centric decisions making, aligning with EU fundamental rights. And to finish, I think another important thing is the AI labeling and also traceability. So high-risk AI systems must display clear conformity makings and documentation demonstrate regulatory compliance and traceability across life cycle again. So here I just highlight the key trends, explainability, as I mentioned, the bias mitigation and ethical design and accountability, and labeling and traceability. And rising cybersecurity oversight and audits. What to expect in this case? So since we are facing these different technical and ethical scenarios, what do we have to expect now? So more audits, supervisory expansions by competent authorities and notified bodies, that it is another problematic part because we don't have enough notified bodies yet to cover all these matters. Mandatory incident reporting within strict timelines under NIS2, increase the scrutiny of supply chain security, especially for AI models and cloud-based medical data services. And the future role of data protection and transparency in innovation, again, It's important to highlight that the data protection remains the heart of the digital governance, and it involves the cybersecurity part because we are handling sensitive data. And it expanding beyond the GDPR to include sector-specific instruments, as I mentioned earlier. So we also have to understand here that the future of role of the data protection and transparency in innovation is no longer just a compliance requirement. So it is shaping product strategic as well. And for example, now I can mention the trust. It will be a competitive advantage. So manufacturers that demonstrate stringent data protection and transparency will win trust with hospitals, patients, regulators, investors, clinical partners, and others. So transparency will drive adoption. So clinicians and health institutions increasingly expect clarity on data use, visibility into AI behavior, explicit justification for algorithms, traceability of updates, auditability of decision-making pathways. And again, manufacturers who provide this proactively stand out. And also data protection frameworks, GDPR plus the European Health Data Space Development will define acceptable innovation. And in this case, innovation can only scale if it respects purpose limitation, minimization, patient control, secure cross-border data sharing, and interoperable health data standards. And again, the European Health Data Space will accelerate this process, mainly in the case of harmonized data formats and cross-border exchange. So to finish now, I brought here this purple box that brings the most important thing that we should bear in our minds, that is future compliance will depend not only on technical conformity, but on demonstrable ethical responsibility and continuous risk management. Organizations that embrace this proactive, integrate approach will be best positioned to lead the next era of trustworthy healthcare innovation. So thanks, everyone. I hope you joined us and could enjoy this webinar. And now we are open to questions. Thank you. I will pass to Orla.
Thank you so much to all of you. That was a fantastic. I do know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I'll try cover at least one or two questions. But again, any questions that we don't get to, haven't submitted a question yet, please do so using the Ask a Question widget on the left side of your screen. So for the first question here, what regulatory trends should MedTech companies expect as AI-enabled medical devices grow, particularly regarding the EU AI Act and cybersecurity oversight?
Hi. Okay, thanks for the question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Orla. Thanks for the question. And okay, so what can I say? That is, MedTech companies will face increasing regulatory expectations as the EU AI Act begins enforcement, introducing new ethical and technical requirements for high-risk AI systems used in medical devices. So this includes transparency obligations, robust data quality, human oversight, and continuous monitoring. So at the same time, cybersecurity scrutiny is rising, with regulators emphasizing secure design, so vulnerability management and audit readiness. Together, these trends signal a shift toward more rigorous lifecycle oversight for digital and AI-driven medical technology, as I mentioned in the presentation. So I hope it is okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fernanda. And yeah, unfortunately, we're getting too close to the top of the hour. So the rest of questions that were submitted during this session will reach out to you directly with an answer. And there's still time to submit some now. But with that, I would just really like to thank you all for tuning in with us today and hope you found it helpful. We look forward to seeing you in our upcoming webinars, and you can check out these in our resources section on the website to stay updated, and also access our latest white papers, which have a wealth of information in them, and our blogs that are posted regularly on our site. So make sure to check that out. And we do have plenty of upcoming content. So you do visit our website, and I'm really excited to announce that our next webinar is our hugely popular end of year webinar taking place on December 10th in collaboration with Cooley, Cutting Through the Chaos, a survival guide, a 2025 to 2026 survival guide to ESG, sustainability and product compliance. And it will unpack the latest regulatory developments, share practical insights, and highlight what's coming next as we head into 2026. We're grappling with deadlines, or planning for future compliance. Definitely make sure to join us for this roadmap to navigate the challenges and opportunities ahead. And with that, thank you to our presenters and to all of you who joined us today. And we hope to see you at our next session.